Welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Welcome back to SavvyDentist.com and the Savvy Dentist podcast, the show where great dentistry meets great business. It's Jesse Green here at the control panels as always. And today we're having a talk about teams, leadership, dealing with conflict. And my guest today is Kate Russell. Kate is an expert in leadership. She's got an incredible pedigree and background in mediation and conflict resolution. And she works with the national leaders of large organizations and medium enterprises as well to help them get the most out of their team. Now, in dental practice, if you want to scale up, it means we need to create leverage through systems and team. So the ability to build a self-managing team is critical. And what Kate discusses in this podcast are some of the essential skills to help you get the most from your team. It's a wide-ranging, very practical and interesting interview where she shares heaps of tips, tricks, and tools to help you really excel in that field. I'm also super excited to announce that we're launching the Scaling Summit, which is a 2-day event designed to help people move from a self-employment situation, a business which is key person dependent, requires them to be in the trenches day in, day out, generating revenue, to a truly leveraged business that harnesses the power of a self-managing team and the efficient use of systems. It's a 2-day event. It's going to be held in September in Brisbane, and you can find out more information at scalingsummit.com. I'm also pleased to announce that our guest speaker at that particular event is former Australian cricket captain Steve Waugh, and he's going to be discussing leadership, strategy, and a variety of other things going to help take your business to the next level. So if you want to find out more information, head across to scalingsummit.com and you can get all the information there. It's going to be an epic event. We've got tons of great speakers coming along, and you're just not going to want to miss it. But for now, let's have our conversation with Kate Russell. As always, have a pen and paper handy because you're not going to want to miss a single thing that she shares. It's absolute gold. Here's Kate. Kate Russell, welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come and hang with us. How's things for you today?
They're really good, thank you, Jesse, and thank you so much for this opportunity to be on the show.
Oh, look, it's an absolute pleasure. I've been looking forward to this conversation for quite a while because you've got an incredible reputation in the leadership space. You've published books. You've got a wonderful blog. You've got all those sorts of things that are really helpful and useful, and you serve a great wide number of people. I'm always curious to ask people, Kate, when they come onto the show, how they get into their line of work, because leadership, conflict resolution, all those things that are your bread and butter are not the typical things you would put on your career form as an 18-year-old. So how did you find your way into this work?
Probably by accident, which is probably how lots of people end up in leadership as well.
Yeah.
But I ended up running a community legal centre when I was 23, basically by default because I'd worked there previously. And then I've literally worked with people in high levels of conflict for the last 30 years, working with people in relation to child support. And that's really been the major area where I've learnt my skills. So I was in a community legal centre. I then went off to legal aid and I set up the child support unit at legal aid, and that's where people pay money to the other parent when they've separated. And I set that unit up. When I started, the legislation was new. I was the only person in the section, and then by the time I left there 10 years later, we had 13 staff, so I created my own team. I then went off and have been self-employed for the last 20 years. Part of that work has been as a contractor to the Department of Human Services at Child Support, making decisions about how much money one parent pays to the other. And as part of that process, I've just come across people from all walks of life dealing with really high levels of stress about things which are crucially important to them, being their children and their money, and learnt a lot about conflict through that process. I became a mediator. I did actually start a law degree, but family circumstances were such that I wasn't able to finish that. So then I did mediation. And as a mediator, I also sat on the Social Security Appeals Tribunal and the Public Housing Appeal Panel. So I learnt a lot about people and leadership, and I also learnt about leadership from being involved in theatre and film. And so I've produced a fair few musicals and some training videos and the like. So I've had this diverse background where I've literally worked with so many people, but quite often dealing with very high levels of conflict, and it's taught me a lot.
It's a really interesting background you've got there, Kate, because that is quite an eclectic and an interesting path that you've taken. I'm curious to ask you, in that legal aid role you had when you were in the mediation, and obviously very emotional circumstances when you've got parents involved, and as you say, there's kids and money and all of those things going on. I'm curious to ask you, what did you observe about the human character in that particular role? Because my thinking is that emotions, when they're high, intelligence tends to go out the window a little bit, and it can bring out the best in people, and it can also bring out the worst in people. But what was your experience in that role?
I think you're absolutely spot on. Some people cope incredibly well with high levels of stress and can keep their emotions under control and can think. And then there's a number of people who, because of a whole range of reasons, and usually, I think this starts in childhood, they get very quickly triggered by something that they can't control or that stresses them out a lot, and they don't behave as their best selves. And that's the detriment to themselves, to their relationships with their children. It's painful to watch when people are self-destructive, because it's so much more effective to be able to think when you're under stress, but obviously that's a very difficult ask for some people. And that's partly why I developed a lot of my skills. I also did some training in conflict coaching, specifically to help people think when they are really stressed, because that's the most powerful tool you've got in difficult situations.
Yeah, and you've also written a book which is called Leaders Who Lead, and I think I'm curious to ask you what your views are on leadership in the modern world. Has it changed? Is it continuing to change what we expect from our leaders? Are leadership styles evolving to meet the modern world? And I guess probably as we start, the conversation about leadership, and we'll obviously move back and forth between that and dealing with tricky situations, I guess I'd like to ask you firstly, what prompted you to write that book? Because it takes a lot of effort to write a book. There must have been something that you wanted to say, or something you'd observed, or a message you wanted to get out. I'm curious to understand, what was the impetus to write the book?
The impetus was doing mediation, and particularly doing workplace mediations. And one of the things that I was really acutely aware of was that I was constantly being asked to come in to help a leader deal with a conflict between two members of staff. Yeah. It was usually two members of staff. Mm-hmm. And what I discovered was, with every single mediation, was that the issues that triggered the conflict usually related to the leader. They related to the leadership style, the issues around lack of clarity, or conversations that had not been had, or unreasonable stresses in the workplace, or that type of thing. But there was always some influence from the leader that was triggering some of that conflict, because we don't have to like everybody, and we generally don't like everybody. But we can often work alongside people we don't like because we're focused on the job at hand, and that's the thing that brings us together. So when that's not working, it's telling me there's something else going on. So with my experience of understanding conflict, I just thought I really wanted to help leaders be better leaders. And I think that what happens so often is that lots of people end up in leadership roles because they're good at something else. And because you're good at something else, there's somehow this thought that makes you a leader, but it's a completely different skill set. So what I did was I basically created a handbook on the basics of how to lead. And it starts with self. We have to become aware of self. And once I got a model together, I created a model. And once I got that model together, the book then really just fell into place. It was really exciting then to flesh out the model, which was really good.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that a lot of leaders end up in a leadership role because of a skill set they've got elsewhere. And our audience are dental practice owners, and typically at university there's no training, no reference to how to lead, how to run a business, and all of a sudden a lot of dentists find themselves with a technical skill set around clinical work, but then they're thrust into the role of running a team, growing a business. still trying to do some clinical work themselves, and it can be quite overwhelming for a lot of people. Clearly, that's not just related to dentistry, but why is it you think that leadership is not taught as broadly as it could be? Because if this is such a problem, and I expect it's widespread, where are we not getting this leadership teaching right?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, the universities don't focus on it. It's almost like one of those side things that you're meant to somehow find out yourself. And there's lots of self-help books and all of that, but there isn't the support for all of the different faculties, apart from the business faculties, in teaching people how to do business. And the soft skills are just so crucial,
Yes.
and yet we don't spend time teaching it. I mean, I think they do a little bit more in schools than they used to, but I think it's a tragedy that we don't invest more time and energy in teaching people how to lead or to become more self-aware, because the impact for the team, for that leader and their team going forward, when people are not confident about what they're doing, or their personality traits are such that they struggle with the people side of their business, just makes the job so much harder.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure you hear this routinely as well, but I certainly hear the number one challenge or stressor for business owners, at least dental practice owners, is often around their team and managing other people. Do you see that across industries as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you hear it at dinner parties, and you hear it at barbecues, you hear it everywhere. The leader complains about the team, and the team complains about the leader.
Yeah. It's a bit of a two-way street there. So I'm assuming that you're of the view that leaders can be developed rather than they're not born, essentially. There's no genetic code for leadership, is there?
Well, okay, I'm not an expert on genetic code, but I know that people can develop their skills. Emotional intelligence is something you can teach people.
Yeah.
It's not fixed. And so if you're prepared to invest the time and energy, you can develop your leadership skills, absolutely.
Okay. Well, you mentioned that one of those first leadership skills is around self-awareness and know thyself. How do you increase self-awareness? Do you need to be self-aware to then suddenly realize you need more self-awareness, or what's the trigger for that?
Look, I think that's a really interesting question. And I think that often what happens is that something will happen that will make you become aware that you need to know more. So there will be an incident, there will be a major conflict, or something will go wrong, and suddenly you'll recognize that, wow, I am actually in charge of this and I need to find out more about myself. I think it's when everything's going swimmingly, you're not going to notice. It's when things go wrong that you have to then work out, well, what's triggering this problem? And that's going to often be a trigger for people to actually do the next thing they need to do. And it's frustrating to say that out loud, but the reality is that people don't seek help until they need help. I've seen this in family law, and I've seen this in workplaces. People, it's the spotto effect. If you go looking for yellow cars, suddenly you see yellow cars.
Yes.
So I think when people really need it, they'll find it. There's so many people who say they wish they got the memo earlier. And I think that if you are starting out in business and you can take on advice and you're open to hearing things, then it's a really good time to start it. I mean, it's never too late.
No.
But I think that the trigger is often, the number one trigger for people is because something went wrong.
Okay. So if self-awareness is really critical and we understand that that's a skill that needs to be developed over time, where do you think that leaders in small to medium enterprise typically come unstuck? Obviously, there's the lack of self-awareness, but where else do people make missteps in their leadership?
And I think it comes down to they think that people know what they're thinking.
Yeah.
So lots of assumptions, and they find it very difficult to communicate what they're thinking, what their vision is, how they perceive the business growing and where it's going to, what the roles and responsibilities are. I met with an accountant who was frustrated, and he said that he told the office that he was a relaxed employer and he wanted to have a relaxed environment, but he never defined what relaxed was. And then he complained that they came to work wearing jeans. You have to be able to communicate what you mean. Language means, I always say that that language, particularly the word respect or other important words, is a bit like pizza. I can say the word pizza and we all know what a pizza is, but we all have a different image of what a pizza is, because to me, if it has pineapple on it, it's revolting. Whereas if it's,
I'm with you.
We all have a slightly different understanding of words. So you can't just use words and expect everybody to understand exactly what they mean.
I really appreciate that pizza metaphor, because it's really clear to me as you're discussing that. I'm going, yeah, that's so true, because we hear these words, we come up with different ideas of what that might mean for us. But then it seems to me that a lot of conflict in the workplace comes about through misunderstanding rather than a genuine desire to do the wrong thing. I'm yet to meet the person, and perhaps they exist somewhere, but I'm yet to meet the person who comes to work deliberately wanting to do a poor job. My experience is that a lot of the frustration that comes from being a business owner is derived from that lack of clarity when you've got an expectation of one thing and the team member has a different expectation, as you've articulated. And if we can get that clarity piece right, then hopefully a lot of the issues iron themselves out. Is that a fair assessment?
I think that is absolutely spot on, and that's the beginning of my book. It is absolutely about clarity, and I couldn't agree more with you. I don't know anybody who goes to work to do a bad job. People always want to do their best, and there's so much disappointment, and that's when people start to get resentful, when they want to do the good job, but it feels like then they're trying to do that work with that one hand held behind their back, because they can't please this person because this person can't articulate what they want.
Yeah. So let's talk about articulating what we want. One of the things that I like to have in our business is a culture of accountability. And we want to make sure people are doing what they need to be doing to achieve the results that we want to achieve together as a business. I'd like to ask you, how do you create that clarity piece? For us, it's around scorecards and other things, but there's got to be more to it than scorecards. There's conversations and other things. So what are the tools that a business owner might like to have in their toolbox to create that clarity?
Well, I think there's a number of things. Firstly, you need to slow down to speed up.
Yep.
So you need to actually spend some time working that out. And often you need somebody else to be a sounding board to assist you through that process. So it is about being really clear about your vision and your mission, like why did you do this? Why do you get up in the morning? So I think that's really important. But I also think that it's about engagement, and it's not assuming that you have to know all the answers or you have to be the one that makes all the decisions around this. Because if you do include your team in this process, particularly around creating an understanding about values and roles and responsibilities and processes, you are going to then get their engagement in that, and they're going to participate because they understand it. When we drive a car, we don't just sit in the car and drive the car. We have to go through a process. We have to learn how to drive the car. We then have to be taught and be supervised and a whole range of different things. And I think the same happens in business, that we all know we want to drive the business. We know we want to be able to go somewhere, but you have to slow down to learn all the processes, and you have to ensure that your team understands, just like we have to understand road rules, they understand why they do what they do and where they're going. And if you can engage the team, and that takes time as well, you need to actually spend some time with the team, and you need to do it in a way that you really engage them and that you're not telling them, but you're asking and you're hearing from them. And it doesn't mean you have to take on board everything that they say, but when you ask people to participate in a process and you ask them for feedback, then they feel engaged and involved in that, and then they have some ownership, and then they're going to be really happy to help drive the decisions that are made ultimately and go forward with the business.
Yeah, I think that's fabulous. Yeah, the whole team engagement thing is really critical. And one of the things that I find with dentists, and you know, I don't want to tar everyone with this brush because there'll be many exceptions to what I'm about to say, but as dentists, we tend to be quite self-reliant, where we operate often by ourselves clinically with the help of a dental assistant, but really it's us. And so we're sitting isolated in a room most of the day, and we're not actually engaging with the team for a good portion of the day because the business is operating around us. So the risk I feel for a lot of dental practice owners who are particularly hands-on clinical is that they don't get that day-to-day corridor meeting. Not that I'm recommending meetings in corridors, but you don't get that interaction that you would have incidentally. And so I'm curious to ask you, we spoke a little off air about the DISC profile and where that fits into leadership and some things that might make leadership easier or difficult.
Oh, look, I find DISC such an incredibly useful tool. One, because it helps you understand yourself better and it helps you understand how to communicate with other people so much better. And so I think that when you become aware of where you sit on the DISC profile, you can then start looking at ways in which you can improve the way you communicate with everybody. And so if you are somebody who is an attention to detail person, you will recognise that I need to develop my soft skills so that I can better manage those day-to-day interactions, or I can soften my emails and I can remember to say hi or thank you, because one of the things that we know of through DISC is that if you are really good at attention to detail processes, chances are that the soft skills are something that are going to be something you're going to really need to focus on so that you can maximise your relationships with your team, but not just with your team, but also with your clients.
Absolutely. And I was sharing with you off air that I'm a high C on the DISC profile with a decent amount of D thrown in there for good measure. And I was just relating to you exactly that when I write an email, there are times when I have to write what I want to write, then go back and add the salutation and the softer greeting to make it a little more personable. But I was very fortunate when I was in my early to mid-20s. I had a mentor who introduced me to DISC, and I've spent 20 years working on those soft skills, and thankfully I was fortunate to meet someone who gave me that little bit of insight early. But for anyone listening, I'd really encourage you, if you are a C or a D, as Kate has said, to work on those soft skills. Kate, one of the soft skills that we talk about is how to start a difficult conversation. We call it a necessary conversation. You might call it a difficult conversation. I'm of the view that this is an essential skill that every leader needs to be able to master, and perhaps it falls under the category of soft skills. How do you have a difficult conversation without creating a resentment, without creating anxiety? How do you have that conversation and get an outcome?
The number one way you have it is you care. So we call it a difficult conversation because most people think it's difficult. In fact, it's not that it's difficult. It's difficult to start because we're scared of where it might go.
Yeah.
But the reality is that if we care about somebody, we'd want them to know. So if somebody's work is not up to scratch or there's some other issue, if we don't tell them, they can't do anything about it. So the main thing to do is to think about how would you like to receive information. So if I have food in my teeth, I would like you to be able to tell me that I've got food in my teeth, but I don't want you to make a big fuss about it. And I don't want you to not tell me because you don't want to embarrass me in front of somebody else. So I'd really like you to just whisper in my ear, Kate, you've got food in your teeth, and then I can do something about it.
Sure.
So the same comes with any situation, whether it's you want somebody to dress more appropriately for work or somebody's day-to-day performance might need something. If you tell the person, then they've got an opportunity to change it. So how do you start that? Well, I think the first thing you do is you act straight away. So you don't sit on it and dwell on it for too long, and you don't let them continue to perform in a way that's detrimental to themselves. And I'd take them out for coffee, or even better, a walking meeting, because sometimes that eye-to-eye contact is more stressful and it creates discomfort, whereas if you have a walking meeting, it's like working with teenagers. But if you can start a walking meeting with, I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable, but can we have a chat about what happened the other day? Or there's been some concern, I'm concerned about some of the things that you might be wearing to work and that might be impacting on the way people perceive you in the workplace, that type of thing. If you can start a conversation with, I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable, can we talk about it? Because once you start the conversation, you're usually fine. It's just getting their attention, and it's about, I care about you, and so I'm going to raise this. Is that okay?
Yeah, nice.
You just let it go, and then you go with it. And most people are so grateful for the opportunity to have the issue raised and to deal with it. If somebody's not performing, it is so unfair not to tell them and then to later then look at performance managing them out or whatever. I think we have a duty as leaders to give people information about their performance, but we need to do it in a manner that is caring and is about how can we get the best out of this person, not you are required to do this job, therefore you must do it this way. We need to think about the person. They are people, they're doing their best. How can we help them do it better?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. It's about elevating people, really, isn't it? Trying to get everything you can out of them, not from extracting every last bit of blood, sweat and tears out of them, but I mean getting every last bit of potential out of them so they fulfill their potential in the role. And I really like the way that you're trying to do that with care rather than being the tyrant and saying, here's the job, I need you to do X, Y, Z, and a bit overbearing with it. I wanted to ask you a little bit about conflict, and I know that with any kind of business, there's going to be conflict that arises from time to time, and people like Patrick Lencioni say that one of the dysfunctions of a team is fear of conflict. So I guess what I want to ask you before I get into how to deal with it is there a time when conflict can be good?
Oh, I call conflict a gift. I think conflict is really useful. It's information. It's really useful information that there's a problem. And it leads to some amazing outcomes and often innovation and improvement in processes. So I think conflicts, it can feel uncomfortable, but all it is telling you that there's a problem. And if you go with it instead of fight it, you can get some great outcomes.
Okay, well, I'm of the same view. So in terms of going with the conflict, what does that look like?
It looks like listening. It looks like being quiet. What often happens with leaders is because there's this sense that you have to be in charge, that you have to also make all the decisions and that you have to know what's right or wrong all the time. And often we then jump in way too soon. So for me, if someone comes to you and says there's a problem, there's a problem. It's not for you, the leader, to determine whether it is or isn't a problem. It is a problem. It's a problem for that person. And the next step is you just listen, and you listen really hard and you take lots of notes. And the reason you take lots of notes is twofold. One, you want to demonstrate to the person that what they're telling you is really important, and so you're recording it and you're taking notes. But the other thing too is they're going to give you words that are really important to them. And if you write down those words, then you're going to be able to use their language back to them, and then they'll feel really heard. So it's important to do that, and it's going to take time. And this is where people leaders running their own business, so they're working in their business and on their business, have to be able to give time to their team to listen to them when there is a problem. And then the other thing you need to do when there is a problem is you listen, and then you ask the person, what would they like to do about it? It's not what can I do to fix it, it's what would you like to do about it? Because there is often a perception, again, when leaders think they have to fix something, that they have to come up with a solution. But the person already knows what they want, and you need to hear from them what they want. It may be something you can or can't do. It might be something they can or can't do, but they actually might have a solution that's going to work really well. The other thing you might need to do is to listen to them, send them away, give them an opportunity to sleep on whatever the scenario is, and then come back to you the next day and then talk it through again, because there is nothing like a little bit of distance from whatever has happened to help people work out their next steps.
Yeah.
So always think about, don't react, don't buy into the issue in the moment. Listen, agree with them, believe them. This is their truth. You might not agree with them. You might think that they're exaggerating, whatever. But in that moment when they're telling you their problem for the first time, that is their truth. And you need to believe them. It doesn't mean that you have to accept everything, but you just have to believe them. The next day, you can then start asking other questions. But in that moment, they just want to be heard. And if a person feels heard, then they are going to feel respected, and you've got a much greater chance of being able to resolve that issue without any other action coming into play.
Yeah, ladies and gents, if you've just been listening to us now, I'd really encourage you to rewind about a minute and a half and have a listen to what Kate's just shared with you, because I think there's some absolute gold there. And Kate, I just want to pick up on the thought you had about not needing to fix things for them, asking them what they want to do to sort it out. Because I think as dentists, we are trained to fix problems. That's what we do. That's what people come to us. We're hardwired to fix things. And so when someone comes to us, our natural inclination is to want to fix it. And so, ladies and gents, I'm going to encourage you to just try and put that inclination aside for a moment, as Kate has suggested, and ask that person what they would like to do to sort it out. And I think that's really wise words. So thank you, Kate. That's tremendous.
No worries. And I think also we need to encourage people to have their own conversations with the person that they might be in conflict with.
Mm-hmm.
They're adults, and we don't have to rescue people. And generally when we do end up rescuing people, we find ourselves in the drama triangle, and then we can become part of the problem.
Yes, indeed. So, on that, just because sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I'm just smiling as we're having this conversation, because this is something that comes up all the time, is the drama triangle, where the leader or the owner of the business suddenly finds themselves drawn into a conflict that's not theirs, and yet somehow it becomes quite angst-ridden for them. So if there are two members who are having conflict, two team members, I should say, who are in conflict with one another, I guess what I'm hearing you say is you give them the advice to sort it out with that person. And then what happens if you need to have a three-way conversation? How do you mediate that? What are the essential mediation skills there? I'm assuming listening is going to be a huge part, but how do you create the space for each of them to be heard?
You do that by, first and foremost, you need to have that individual conversation with them first, so that they feel heard. Then you need to actually work out what the issue is.
Yep.
And this is where you, as the owner or the leader, need to think about, how might I have contributed to this?
Mm-hmm.
So what is the issue here? Is it a lack of clarity? Does this first person feel like they're not being appreciated? There can be a whole range of different things that can happen here. It could be that they think that somebody's getting favoritism, that there's special treatment for somebody. Sometimes quite often the leader is contributing towards this conflict without intentionally doing so, because I don't think people do try and cause conflict.
Yep.
But I've seen it happen quite often where boundaries are not clear.
Mm-hmm.
And so that has been one of the major issues. And it's actually up to the leader to then step back and go, okay, this is a boundary issue. What boundaries do we need to put in place to make this work better?
Yep.
So what I often do with teams is I ask them, what does a good day look like, and how can we get more of that? And we set those boundaries, because it's so much easier for your team to operate if everybody knows what the rules are. It's when you don't have boundaries and rules that things get blurred, and that's when you're going to set yourself up for more conflict and interpersonal conflict within the workplace. So how have I potentially contributed towards this? And then what I would do is you get them in the room and you give them an opportunity to speak to each other. And you can create an agenda. I mean, mediation, we create an agenda
mm-hmm.
based on the major issues. And then we work through those agenda items. But we have to have rules in place.
Yeah,
we have to use I language. You have to take responsibility for your own emotions and how you feel in that moment. But you have to hear each other. So no interrupting, and let that other person explain what's going on for them, what their belief of the story is, what their understanding is, because often it just comes down to different interpretations of similar information.
Yep.
Or assumptions that have been made. And then what would we do to fix this, and how can we make sure that this doesn't happen again? Use it. It's a growth tool. It's so powerful. And then who else needs to know? Else do we need to talk to make sure that we can implement change and make this long-term positive change for the entire team?
Yeah. And then, of course, some follow-up, right, to make sure, I guess there's a checking back in process around that as well?
Absolutely. So, again, after you have that process, people will be tired, because that conversation is quite draining.
Yeah.
So you might send them home that day after you've had that conversation, so that they can just sort of process what has just gone on. But also then you need to check in with them the next day, a week later, 2 weeks later. Just, are you okay? How's it going? Do we need to tweak whatever we've agreed on?
Yeah.
Is this working?
Yeah, I really like the fact that you set some ground rules up front as well. One of the things that we've found in the work that I do is if you can pre-frame that conversation, establish how the conversation is going to go, have those ground rules in place, you get a much better outcome than if you don't. And I know a few people have gone into those conversations and admitted to do that, and it's turned into that drama triangle that you spoke about. So just, I guess I'm probably answering my own question here, but how important is that pre-framing and ground rules section?
It is absolutely crucial. And it goes to everything, which is the slow down to speed up.
Yep.
It's constantly, what are our boundaries? What does respect look like?
Yeah.
And I run sessions specifically on what does respect look like because, again, it goes to the word pizza. It does mean different things to different people. So if you don't have ground rules in place and you don't know what might upset or trigger another person, then you could, lead them down a garden path to having an inflame of the conflict to start with. So you need to have ground rules. You need to work out, what do we need to put in place here? What do we need to know about each other to make this conversation safe?
Yeah, I love that. And interestingly, Kate, I know you run sessions on how to start a difficult conversation. So if anyone is thinking that's a skill they'd really like to master and spend some time with Kate, please do reach out to Kate at Kate with a K at theconflictcoach.com.au and get some skills in that, because I'm of the view that this ability to have a conversation of this nature is a fundamental skill that every leader needs to master, along with one or two others. But I'd say this is a key skill to develop, and Kate's going to be able to help you do that. So do reach out to her if you'd like to avail yourself of that opportunity. Kate, I want to just ask you a couple of other little things that I think the audience might benefit from. If you could tap people on the shoulder, if you're a fly on the wall and you could tap people on the shoulder or whisper some advice in their ear, what sort of things would you really like to say to business owners if you're a fly on the wall?
The number one thing is you don't have to have all the answers.
Yeah.
It's too much responsibility and it stresses you out. So you are good at what you are good at, and then you need to develop the other skills, but also you need to trust the people in your team. You've employed them for a specific reason because they're good at what they do. So let them be good at what they do. And the way in which you can do that safely is to set up those processes, procedures and boundaries early in the piece so that you know where everybody stands and they know where they stand. And then you can let them go and you can trust them. People love to do a good day's work. The number one motivation for people to go to work is play. And play is doing what you're good at. So give people the boundaries and the rules so that they can go and play and do what they're good at.
Yeah. Okay, love that. Equally, one other last question I've got for you. Of all the leaders that you can think of, who is the leader that you think exemplifies leadership in the best possible way?
At the moment, because we're going through the fire season, Shane, the head of the fire services in New South Wales, would have to be an absolute standout as an exemplary leader, as is Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand. It's the capacity to lead with compassion and dignity and respect and empathy that is so extraordinary about those two people. They're quiet, they don't make a fuss, they do what they need to do. Leadership is about getting the best out of people. It's leading with heart and looking after people. It's not about you. It's about your team and how you can get the most out of them and how you can look after them when they're going through difficult times. So those are the people that I feel really stand out as extraordinary leaders.
Yeah, I think a lot of people listening to this podcast would absolutely agree wholeheartedly with that. So again, really wonderful. Kate, you've been really generous with your time today, and I know you're traveling, so thank you so much once again for taking the time. Ladies and gents, I'd really encourage you to head across to Kate's site, which is called theconflictcoach.com.au, and have a look around at all the resources there. There's a ton of things there which I think will be really helpful, and grab yourself a copy of Kate's book, which is Leaders Who Lead, because again, there's just some wonderful practical strategies in there to enhance your leadership. So again, Kate, I'd like to take the opportunity to say thank you from all of us here at Savvy Dentist. You're doing tremendous work, and long may that continue. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jessie Green. For more free tools and resources, join the free Facebook group. Visit drjessiegreen.com/Facebook. And for more episodes, visit drjessiegreen.com/savvydentist.